And welcome back, everybody. On this episode of the Rugby Review, we're going to be going through round 3 of the Major League Rugby. So let's take a look at the game schedule. This is round 3's game schedule, where on April 11th, there was one game played between Old Glory DC and New England Free Jacks, and then the following day, the other 2 games were played. The first game was between Seattle Seawolves and Anthem RC, followed by California Legion versus the Chicago Hounds. And here are all of the final results for round 3. So the first game of the week between Old Glory and New England Free Jacks was a super close game where Old Glory just edged out Free Jacks by a score of 21-19. And so we're going to take a quick look at that stat sheet here. And so this is, again, super close game. There's not much between the 2 teams here. This was a rematch of a semifinal game last season during the playoffs. So there's a bit of history between these 2 teams. There's always going to be a little extra something to this game. Now, despite what the stats say here, New England was most certainly the team exerting a lot of offensive pressure, definitely a lot of territory pressure. Old Glory had to make 229 tackles compared to 142 for New England. So it's, big defensive effort for Old Glory. Lots of offensive play for the Free Jacks. However, this game was decided based off which 10 converted the tries. So, this game was decided by Old Glory's fly half converting all 3 tries that were scored, and Free Jacks 10 only happened to convert 2 of the 3 tries that the Free Jacks scored. So, again, super close, competitive, physical game between the 2 teams, a rematch of a semifinal, and it just came down to which fly half was able to convert all of the tries that were scored by either team. So, close victory for Old Glory. Old Glory is not going to be upset securing a road victory. And the Free Jacks are still trying to look for that first victory of the season. So we'll see how things progress for the Free Jacks in round 4. Going back to our stat sheet here, the next game that was on the list was the Anthem versus Seawolves game, where Anthem secured a victory by a score of 34-25. And so as we look at our stat sheet here, you probably would think Seawolves definitely were the much stronger team and probably should have won this game. Possession territory heavily skewed towards Seattle. Anthem's the team under defensive pressure, having to make more tackles during the course of the game. Not a huge number of tackles, especially compared to what Old Glory just had to do. So Anthem, 139 tackles made to just 93. For the Seawolves, Seawolves significantly outgaining Anthem during the course of this game. Significant number more of clean breaks when Seattle had the ball offensively. Again, just looking over all of this, ill discipline on the part of Seattle really killed them, especially by the end of the game. I understand, Anthem wasn't the most disciplined either. Anthem had 14 penalties conceded, but Seattle had 17. 17 penalties plus double-digit handling errors. Not usually a great combination, so somebody might be able to say, well, Seattle maybe lost this game instead of Anthem winning. Up for debate, depends on what your viewpoint is. But anyway, really good win for Anthem. And fun fact, this was Anthem's first ever home victory. So we've got a lot of history being made by Anthem this rugby season, so it's been a lot of fun to see. Anthem secured their first victory as a club team ever, round 1, and now they've secured their first home victory ever, round 3. So again, lots of good momentum for Anthem so far in the early stages of this season, and of course, Seattle will look to get back into the winners column next round in round 4. And so, and again, back to the final results sheet one last time. The last game of round 3, again, was between Chicago Hounds and California Legion, and this was a super dominant performance by Chicago, almost kind of like a statement victory, where Chicago secured the victory by a score of 48-24. So we'll quickly look at the stat sheet here, and again, this was a really, really, really strong performance by Chicago this particular week, getting a very dominant victory over California. 8 tries scored for Chicago this week. You know, this isn't one of those games where one team dominates the other and has dominant possession, dominant territory. Again, not the case this week. Possession 50-50, territory slightly in favor of Chicago. Number of tackles made, very comparable between the two. When we start getting to tackles missed, meters gained, and further down the stat sheet, that's when we can start seeing things, can start seeing stats a little skewed in favor of Chicago. So, number of tackles made, very, very similar between the two teams. 166 for Chicago, 163 for California. Missed tackles is when we start to see a huge difference here. 32 missed tackles for California to just 18 for Chicago. So Chicago's doing a much better job hitting, sticking, and converting those tackles into made tackles, not really allowing California to get too much offensive momentum, whereas California falling off a larger number of tackles, which is converting into a higher number of clean breaks for Chicago, allowing Chicago to get a lot of front foot ball. And you can really, really see that with meters gained in this game. Chicago had 422 meters gained to 269 for California. So again, really, really strong performance, really, really dominant performance by Chicago this week. We'll look to see if they can keep that momentum going into round 4. And obviously California, just like Seattle, just like Free Jacks, will try and bounce back and get back in the winners column for round 4. So that's all the games for round 3 in the MLR. Let's take a look at the leaderboard here. And one thing I want everybody to keep in mind, Anthem plus California Legion have one extra game played so far, so, Seattle, Chicago, Old Glory, Free Jacks, they're going to have the ability to make up that game, and it'll add some variation and kind of change up the rankings. So with that being said, Chicago, 2 wins for 2 games played. They are sitting at top of the leaderboard, 2-0, maximum of 10 points scored. They've got a huge points differential. And then Anthem is right behind Chicago, followed by California Legion. And then we've got Seattle sitting at the 4 spot with Old Glory in the 5 seed and Free Jacks at the bottom of the table at the 6 seed. So we'll see how this shakes up as the rounds continue on. So let's look at round 4's game schedule. And round 4's game schedule is as followed. On April 18th, we're going to have Anthem versus Old Glory DC, and then the following day, Chicago's going to play the Free Jacks, and then California Legion will be playing Seattle. So that's it for this particular episode of the Rugby Review. If you guys happen to like the video, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. If you know anybody that might be interested in these types of videos, please feel free to send it to them and share it with them. And I will see y'all next time for the next episode. Have a good one.